Hey guys, Grandy Tamias here, and welcome to my preconceptions and later my first thoughts on Jurassic World Rebirth. So for those of you who are relatively new to this channel, I have been a fan of the Jurassic Park franchise and other paleo media since my early high school days. Although my interest in dinosaurs and other prehistoric wildlife goes back even farther than that. I actually did do other Jurassic videos a few years ago when the previous film, Jurassic World Dominion, came out, including before and after review videos for it. I talked more about my paleo obsession in that Preconceptions, so I recommend watching that if you want more detail, since I'm not going to re-explain it here. And not much has really changed. However, those videos didn't do very well in terms of views, so it kind of discouraged me from wanting to revisit this franchise for video topics. But I figured it's been long enough, and there aren't any other movies coming out this year that I'm passionate enough to do review videos for, so I figured I'd review this one just to keep this video format going. And I'm not expecting these to do very well in views either, so I won't be too disappointed. Although I do want to address that my feelings on Dominion have changed. I still don't think it's that bad, but I was pretty quick to praise it in comparison to the previous two films. I have also grown more appreciation for Jurassic Park 3, which I never thought was that bad either. I did rewatch Dominion recently, particularly the extended cut, which I do believe is superior since it has the prologue. But even that, I feel, is kind of bogged down by how the Giganotosaurus gets misused later on. Hopefully it gets done justice in the Chaos Theory Netflix show, which thankfully did so for the Pyroraptors and Atrociraptors. Okay, maybe less so in that case, since there's still discount Velociraptors. Speaking of that show, I've been enjoying it, especially that third season, and I'm looking forward to the fourth. It handles the events of Dominion and the characterization of Sayona Santos better. She essentially got the Clone Wars Darth Maul treatment of being better in animation than in live action. But since the next season isn't coming out until after Rebirth, I wonder if any future seasons are going to make any effort to connect to this new film. I have my doubts though, since the series is being handled by some of the same people who worked closely on the previous three films, like Colin Trevorrow and Scott Kramer, while Rebirth has a different creative team that I'll talk more about in a moment. It seems to me like this seventh film in the franchise, and first of a potentially new trilogy, is taking the same route as Star Wars did when it was in that situation, and seems to be promising a return to form more akin to the very first film. Which is ironic, since in the lead-up to The Force Awakens, there were a lot of comparisons going around between it and Jurassic World. Sure, Jurassic World did do a lot of nostalgia pandering, but the plot itself wasn't derivative of Jurassic Park necessarily, the way that Force Awakens was derivative of the 1977 film. No, I will not call it A New Hope. Like, where Force Awakens had its stand-ins for Darth Vader, the Death Star, and the sensitive enemy data in a droid, Jurassic World had things like the Mosasaurus, which wasn't a stand-in for anything from the original film. And as well, the concept of militarized dinosaurs, which I know wasn't super popular, but at least it's something different from the previous three movies because they never explored the applications of dinosaurs outside of theme park attractions. As far as my anticipation of Rebirth goes, the biggest draw for me isn't actually the dinosaurs, but rather the cast and crew. For starters, none of the previous human characters or dinosaur characters are showing up in the movie. So I wonder how they're going to make this feel cohesive with the previously established lore. Scarlett Johansson plays the film's lead character, Zora Bennett, and from what I've seen in the trailers and behind-the-scenes interviews, this is not a role that she took simply to collect a paycheck. Scarlett is clearly passionate about being part of Jurassic, and I'm not surprised given how young she was when the original film came out and the influence that it had on her generation.
I mean, since I saw the original film when I was probably 9 years old in the theater, it was a transformative experience for me as an audience member, and I have been vying to sneak my way into the Jurassic universe for my entire career. So it actually is a dream come true for me.
And it shows because, to me at least, in my opinion, Zora is not giving off the same vibe as Black Widow, which is more than enough to dispel any doubt in Scarlett's talent as an actress. And I gotta say, between this, Transformers 1, and her other recent films like Fly Me to the Moon, she's been killing it in her post-MCU career. Speaking of the MCU, Mahershala Ali plays Duncan Kincaid, and if his character survives the movie, I'm hoping that this turns into a big franchise role for him. I'm sure he needs it since Marvel can't seem to get his Blade movie off the ground. I'm not familiar with the rest of the cast, but the choice of director Gareth Edwards really intrigues me. I've never seen Rogue One because Disney. What that company did to Star Wars. But from that and the 2014 Godzilla, which I have seen, I do think that Gareth has a certain way of capturing a sense of scale with large things. I was expecting his approach to a Jurassic movie would include something like that scene in the Rogue One trailer where the characters are running on the beach except with the AT-AT walkers replaced with sauropods. And while the trailers have shown nothing exactly like that, I do think Gareth has captured the scale of these titanosaurs pretty well, like with this low-angle shot from the human's perspective, not too dissimilar to the Brachiosaurus scene in the original movie. I also think Gareth's Godzilla experience may have influenced the main dinosaur antagonist of this film, but more on that later. It is surprising that David Koepp, the screenwriter of the first film and The Lost World, returned to write this movie, again, probably as part of that return to form I mentioned earlier. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing. In fact, I like the way he wrote that Spielberg sense of adventure in those first two films. And those of you who watch my other types of videos know how much I love stories about epic adventures with grandiose thrills. And it's especially great that David Koepp is finally adapting the river raft scene from the first novel. From how the trailer depicts the scene, I get the feeling that the T-Rex is behaving very much out of curiosity, like it's toying with the raft. I mean, it would make sense because the raft is bright yellow and animals like brightly colored objects. As far as this film's premise goes, I'm not quite sold on it, and it feels like another excuse to get characters to run around on an island full of dinosaurs. So the dinosaurs on the mainland aren't so much a big deal anymore because they couldn't adapt and died out, which I actually don't have a problem with. I know it kind of undoes what the previous trilogy did, but it's actually realistic in nature. For my fellow American viewers, remember those Asian giant hornets that briefly took over the news in 2020? Yeah, you're not hearing much about that 5 years later because they just couldn't adjust to survive in US climates soon enough to become an established invasive species. What I do have a problem with, though, is the mission of the main characters, which is to go to yet another dinosaur laboratory island that InGen just so happened to have and grab DNA from the three largest animals, the aforementioned Titanosaurus, the Quetzalcoatlus, and the Mosasaurus, in order to engineer new advancements in medicine. But why the three largest animals? What does their size have to do with them being the source of the medical advancements? I consider myself decently versed in understanding the medical applications of animals, like amphibians that can treat cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, etc., but I've never heard of the size of those creatures being a factor. I feel like this three largest species thing was just made up to give general audiences something easy to understand, which feels kind of offensive, like Universal thinks we're dumb. I think I speak for all of you watching when I say that we should be trusted to understand or at least accept scientific names and concepts when we're talking about a movie that is so heavily predicated on a real form of science, even if the science itself isn't completely accurate. Plus, by the logic of these films, these creatures are genetically modified to begin with, so InGen should have known about these medically assisting genes before they even cloned the first dinosaur. So I suspect that this is all a cover-up for something else, perhaps something that will tie into the new mutant dinosaurs. Yes, it's time I discuss that. After Fallen Kingdom, Colin Trevorrow said that there would be no more hybrid dinosaurs, at least in the movies. The video games have continued to feature hybrids like the Stegoceratops, Spinoraptor, and Ankylodocus, along with the Scorpius rex and Spinoceratops from Camp Cretaceous. Oh yeah, and there are countless more in the mobile games. So now the franchise seems to be selling itself on mutant dinosaurs being the new hot stuff, because simple hybrids aren't cutting it anymore. I share Lowry's sentiment from Jurassic World. We don't need these hybrids, or mutants in this case, we just need dinosaurs, real dinosaurs. From what I understand, the mutants are hybrids, just deformed or distorted. Hence the Distortus Rex, having a bulbous head that I kinda want to poke because I bet it's squishy. I felt a beluga's melon before, and it's quite a feeling, I'll tell you. The D-Rex seems to be mostly based on T-Rex DNA, obviously, but who knows what else is in it. Maybe it does have beluga DNA. And the way it walks on its knuckles and has tiny arms on its belly reminds me of the Mutos in Godzilla 2014, which I have no doubt was a Gareth Edwards design choice. He must have a thing for that look. Much like how Toothless from How to Train Your Dragon looks like Stitch from Lilo and Stitch, with the wide mouth, big eyes, and tall ears, and befriending the village's weird kid, since both of their animated films had the same two directors. Funny how they both got live-action remakes recently. The Mutodon, though, seems to be much more of a traditional hybrid, being Velociraptor and Pteranodon. Although the look of the face doesn't give me the impression of either, the tip of the beak looks like it's turned down like a vulture or hawk, so it doesn't look quite like a blend of its component species. It kind of looks like the Skeksis from the Dark Crystal. And seriously, Distortus Rex? Mutodon? Who comes up with these names in-universe? Pepsisaurus and Tostitodon sound like much better names than that. Also, calling them mutants is a bit misleading since every living thing alive is a mutant in some way. You know how you've always been told that your DNA is 50% from each of your biological parents? Well, that's not 100% true. There are dozens to even hundreds of differences in your genetic code that are not identical to either of your parents, all resulting from random errors like base pair swaps, additions, or deletions. These mutations are mostly inconsequential, which is why you don't get radical things like beluga-headed dinosaurs, but they make you, you. And over generations, these mutations can accumulate into changes that may be favored or rejected by natural selection, thereby driving the process of Darwinian evolution. So, to sum up my thoughts on the mutants, I'm kind of pessimistic on how the film is going to justify their existence. I would have preferred classic dinosaurs or other prehistoric creatures take their place. Heck, since this film is called Rebirth and not Rehatched, why not introduce creatures that actually give birth, like Cenozoic mammals? We already saw a Smilodon in Camp Cretaceous, and Siberian mammoth remains were shown as well, so we know that cloning mammals is a possibility in the Jurassic Park universe. It would limit the possibility of having a large carnivore as the antagonist, but at least it would be interesting. But as for the other new and redesigned creatures, I love the look of the Mosasaurus in this movie. It's actually smooth like you'd expect a hydrodynamic reptile to be. Those trademark Jurassic World carnivore scoots must have been creating a lot of drag on that old Mosasaurus. And unless the filmmakers have big plans for the Mosasaurus, I want it to stay out of any potential sequels, instead of shoehorning it in with nothing relevant to do for 2 movies! The Spinosaurus I'm a bit mixed on. I like that it's very up-to-date with the skull shape, paddle tail, the shape of the dorsal fin, and the aquatic lifestyle, but I still miss the old Jurassic Park 3 version with its more rounded snout and red, blue, and gray color scheme. I think they should have blended the two designs to show some continuity, like that the old one had some errors in how InGen scientists reconstructed it, so that we could have a more scientifically accurate version, but not so accurate that it takes away from the aesthetic that made the original so visually interesting. They kind of used that excuse with the Dominion dinosaurs, like how the T-Rexes were shown missing their feathers that the one in the Cretaceous prologue had. On a side note, since that prologue shows the Jurassic Universe's version of real dinosaurs at that time period, future films are going to have to be careful what they declare as accurate, especially if they ever flash back to prehistoric times again. Without a time machine, hopefully. It's no wonder then that dinosaurs like the Velociraptor and Spinosaurus weren't in the prologue because fans would have been in uproar. But I assume the Jurassic Universe's version of real Spinosaurs and Mosasaurs look closer to how they do in Rebirth. However, because the prologue shows a Quetzalcoatlus, which looks identical to the one shown during the main events of Dominion, and is fairly accurate, minus the size, we know that the new Rebirth Quetzalcoatlus is very heavily altered from what it really is in-universe. It's a cool design, don't get me wrong, but they should have just given it the name of a different Asdarkid pterosaur like Hatzegopteryx or Thanatos Drakon from Jurassic World Evolution 2. Honestly, the latter would be really funny because then Scarlett Johansson would be fighting another sci-fi creature with a name based on the Greek word Thanatos. Okay, so Black Widow never actually fought Thanos per se because she got pinned under some rubble, but she was there when he got his head chopped off, so that's gotta count for something, right? But yeah, for the pterosaur, I'm just gonna headcanon that the characters in the movie misnamed it. Backing up a bit to the canonical accuracy, in air quotes, of the extinct species, Dominion had a bigger emphasis on feathers with the fluffy prologue T-Rex, the Pyroraptor, Oviraptor, Morus intrepidus, and the Pycnofibers on the Quetzalcoatlus. So as much as I like some of the updated creature designs, I do feel like Rebirth took a step back. since one of the only instances of feathers in this movie seems to be the velociraptors, which revived that design feature from Jurassic Park 3. And honestly, I think that this is the best the animal has ever looked in these films, aside from all the problems that make it not a velociraptor. Maybe it's because of the colors, like the blue under the eye and the orange on the antorbital fenestra, because orange is my favorite color, if you didn't know. That's why I use it a lot in my thumbnails. And maybe that explains why I like to call so much from the Sonic the Hedgehog games. I do still prefer the look of the Pyroraptor, which is also orange, and I wish that it was just the default raptor in these movies from now on. But as a creature design for the velociraptors in these movies, I think that this is almost perfect. For me, it would be that if it had a few more quills on the head, some larger quills on the arms like the Irex and Indoraptor had, again, would be a nice way to show continuity, and some short feathers or fuzz like the Prologue T-Rex had. Okay, so that concludes the preconceptions portion of this video. Unfortunately, my local theater did not have a early Tuesday showing of this movie, so I'm going to have to wait until the actual release day of Wednesday. But I will nevertheless try to get this video out as fast as possible, and I will be back with my first thoughts. Okay guys, I'm back from the theater, and wow, Gareth Edwards did not disappoint, especially with the visuals. I like that this movie is actually shot on film instead of being digital, and, well, not only does the CGI still integrate pretty well, but the outlines on characters are softer, and it actually feels like a movie that could have been made in the 90s. In fact, there's one shot, like, near the end of the movie that's, like, very, like, sepia tone, and it just looks beautiful. As for what I can say about the story, yeah, like I said in the preconceptions portion, it does capture that Spielberg sense of adventure. And I also want to address that they do explain the whole, like, 3 largest species thing. I know I was confused about that in my preconceptions. They offer an explanation, and it sounds plausible, but I'm not sure, like, exactly how true it is. 'Cause, like, specifically, they're dealing with, like, heart disease and finding a cure for that. There are several returning species from the previous Park and World trilogies, but some of them only get 1 or 2 moments to shine, again, kind of like in Dominion. In fact, the Velociraptor that I talked about in the preconceptions, if that talk got you hyped up, I'm afraid you're going to be disappointed. And the T-Rex only has that one scene on the river raft, but it just would have been really cool if it had come back near the end. But at the same time, the way that they resolve the conflict, yeah, I don't think there would have been a way to integrate the T-Rex in, and it would have just felt too cliche with what the endings of the previous 3 Jurassic World films were. There are some discrepancies with the timeline and the appearances of certain species, but I'll talk more about that when I do my full review, so I'll get to work on that. I'm planning on seeing this movie again tomorrow. Anyway, if you've seen it, please do not spoil it in the comments. If you want to keep up with me outside of my videos, you can join my Discord server or follow me on Twitter. Links to both will be in the description. With all that said, I hope you enjoyed, have a nice day, and thank you for your time.